Bonjour, Kinamagian in Ireland and Dishnikas, and welcome to this production of Social Studies Explorer. Today's episode, Advantages of a Republic. We can't discuss the American Republic without, again, reviewing the Articles of Confederation. And you can see the breakdown of power here on the top in the red and blue. The national government had the power to make treaties, power to print money, and the power to declare war. The states had the power to print money. Each state had one vote in Congress, and 9 out of 13 had to agree. It's clearly going to be a problem when two sides can print money, and that's where it's reflected here in competing currencies. The lack of a national army. So if something happens, you need to call up the state militias, but they might tell you no. And keep in mind at this time, state militias were the most powerful entity we had when it came to fighting forces. And the national government had to basically beg for the states. Excuse me, sir, would you give me some money? And if the states were going to, play the role of Scrooge, they might just say, nope, go away. Here's your lump of coal. That's clearly not a good way to run a country. Now, there are some good ideas in it, and some of these details do survive through our current Constitution. But again, it's not perfect. Some big ideas. The Articles of Confederation created our first plan for a national government. It set up a republic, and this is a system where people elect representatives to run the country. There were many weaknesses. For example, it set up a weak national government that did not have the power to tax. Therefore, there was little money to run the government. Can you imagine that today? And we'll talk about the Northwest Ordinance at another time. Some key words: loyalists, colonists who had remained loyal to the king; sovereign, administering its own government and not dependent on another power. And you may hear that term sovereignty with our own community here and other native nations around Turtle Island. Articles of Confederation are first plan of government. Confederation, alliance, a group of independent organizations that work together. And you can see the example is actually under the Haudenosaunee League was a confederation made up of 5 nations, now 6. You may sometimes see it in the book referred to as the Iroquois Confederacy. But as time's gone on, we've gotten better at actually using their people's names and not just anglicizing everything. Government by consent, people have to agree to be governed. Plus, that's a noble concept that really can't be applied by the government in charge. So it was great to say, well, we have to agree to be governed when we wanted to be gone. But now that we're here, it's like, no, you know what? You can't leave. We'll touch on that topic in another 80 years from this lesson, at least. Republic is a government not led by a hereditary ruler, leaders based on birth, but where people hold the power of government and choose leaders to make decisions. We are a republic, and many people say, but Mr. I, we're a democracy. We walk around promoting democracy. We do promote democracy, but we are not a true democracy. We have elements of it. The town halls that we talked about in previous chapters, where the entire town would get together and vote on something, that's closer, although it's still not a true democracy, because at that time it was pretty much white landowning males that could vote and not everybody. But if everyone of a certain age would have had a say, that would have been a true democracy. True democracies would be messy in a country of nearly 350 million people, because if we decided, hey, let's say we all wanted to vote on new stop signs in some random community. Could you imagine us all having to get together and vote on that? We'd spend all our money voting. The quote After the Revolutionary War, most people in America were glad that they were no longer British. Still, they were not ready to call themselves Americans. The last thing they wanted was to be called a nation. This is where they saw themselves as New Yorkers and Virginians, uh, amongst others. And this is going to hold true for a lot of people through the Revolutionary War, and then into the Civil War. Um, they weren't saying, "Hey, we're Americans." Woo! Takes time. So, the organization of the government under the Articles, a very weak national government, where state governments getting most of the power with and sharing it with other states. You can see that that's a problem. Power is on the state side, and that can be okay, but it's not always okay. Because states tend to do some really sketchy things, and you'll see that through our nation's history, where they're like, well, you can't tell us what to do, states' rights. And the downside on many things with states' rights is it tends to be endorsing things that most moral people be like, yeah, that's not a good thing. Slavery. There's still an argument today. Well, it wasn't about slavery. It was about states' rights. It was about states' rights to continue slavery. It really was about slavery. But that's a lesson for another school year. So, what is a republic? Characteristics of a republic: heredity or birthright does not decide who will rule in our country. Every person, in theory, that is a natural born citizen of the United States that meets all of the other constitutional requirements can be president. If you're over the certain age, even if no matter where you're born, you could serve in the Senate, serve in the House of Representatives. Now, does that mean that, heredity and family name never helps? No, of course not. We've had two different sets of fathers and sons be president of the United States. John and John Quincy Adams, and George H.W. and George W. Bush. But we also see a lot of families that we see in government over long periods of time. The Kennedys in the last century would be one. In fact, Mr. Trump has talked openly about his family name and wanting it to be in roles of leadership. And there are a lot of other families that would love to do that. And then there are some that work behind the scenes and still have quite a bit of power towards our ruling. A republic is based on the core democratic value of popular sovereignty. This means the people hold the power of government. The idea is that when people get to vote on everyone, it would make the government more responsive. And to some extent, that's true. To some extent, it doesn't always work that way. Keep in mind, at the outset of our country, Senate was elected by state legislators who were supposed to be responsive to the public. But with anything else, there's a lot of money in government, and politicians tend to be more responsive to the people that are giving them money to stay in power. It's not necessarily a great thing, it's just a thing. Since we all cannot make decisions on a daily basis for our government, we have a representative government. This means the people choose representatives to make decisions for them. What are some advantages? They're chosen to serve the common good. Now, my view of the common good might be different than Mike in Biloxi or Mike in Richmond or Mike in Sacramento. But I can only worry about the people that I'm going to elect. Unless I, of course, want to donate to the campaign of whoever's running against the people I don't agree with. Representatives help everybody, not just a favored group. And that's what we hope for as a nation. Again, it doesn't always work that way. In fact, there are a number of moments in our history where at least individual representatives weren't working for everybody. Having representatives make laws and decisions is a more efficient system than having everybody make them. This is definitely true. Like I said, let's say that we wanted to put a new road here in Isabella County. Does everybody need to vote on it? Can you imagine every time we wanted to do something at the county level, everyone in the county would have to vote, or at the state level? There may be days where on individual proposals that it sounds good, but in real time, it's not efficient. It costs a lot of money. There's a reason that we have 4 election days a year and not 400 different elections. The people maintain a say in their government through their representatives. And that's supposed to be true, although sometimes, if you're in the minority in a region, you may not always agree with this. But that's just how it is. The representatives listen to the people, or the people will vote them out of office. Characteristics of the government under the article. Congress had one, each state had one vote. A lot less people to come to Washington. Congress had limited powers, which included the power to declare war, make treaties, and settle serious disagreements between states. To pass a law, Congress needed 9 out of 13 states. Did not have the power to tax, had to rely on voluntary contributions from the states. You could almost see the states holding out, or the federal government holding a red kettle drive, like our charities do at the holiday season, in order to, pay for a war. There is no single leader or executive under the articles. A committee of representatives kept the government running when Congress was meeting. There is no plan for a national court system. Congress had no power over the state governments and their citizens. Congress could print money, but so could states, and Congress could not raise any army without permission from the states. Some of these things will create an issue, and your assignment today will be to complete this worksheet. There will be a Google form that has these same things posted where you will list the potential problem. Well, next session, we'll review this and we'll move on to some new content. Hope you have a Minogijigat, Minwa, Bamapi.